Now, were there any Men in Black programs that actually used like non-human species part of the project?
Well, you hear about it, and there's a lot of legends going back and certain incidents. I personally did not know of any, but I wasn't fully briefed into everything. There could possibly be some kind of working relationships between the extraterrestrials that are visiting Earth, that are here, and the Men in Black. But I personally don't know of any.
But you're saying, in your opinion, it's a possibility.
Yes, it's a possibility. I've heard of it happening from other intelligence officers, but me, I've never seen it personally.
What do you mean you heard about it?
Well, I had intelligence officers I worked with, especially two of them that worked out of Area 51 with me, who had different accesses than I had to different operations. And they told me once that they'd worked with these two Section K guys. Within the government, we don't call them Men in Black. We call them Section Ks. And the Section K guys. And they worked with some of the people some of the ETs that we had here. And that's really basically all I was told.
Now, do you have direct, contact or direct involvement with the Men in Black?
I don't nowadays, but I did. I mean, I had an incident happened at Kirtland Air Force Base where I was the very first experience I had with the Men in Black. And that involved two pilots flying A-7D fighter jets for the 150th Air National Guard. They were flying a training mission from Kirtland Air Force Base down to White Sands, a classified landing area around White Sands. While they were coming in for a landing, the White Sands air traffic control operator told them, "You got a bogey flying around your aircrafts. You guys need to be careful." And the pilots saw this object flying around. It was a cigar-shaped object. It was probably 40 to 50 feet long. It was thick in diameter, and it was spinning like a top. And the pilots didn't know what it was, about 10,000 feet. So the pilots asked air traffic controller, we need to land. We need to go to a lower altitude and land and get away from this object up here. So as they were traveling to a lower altitude, this craft moved with them. And somehow the craft collided with those two A-7Ds. The air traffic controller saw the A-7D aircrafts, and A-7D's aircrafts are just jet fighters. They're older jet fighters. Mm-hmm. And the UFO all disappeared, only to reappear at the end of the runway. Both A-7Ds were on the ground, and this UFO was on the ground. So the air traffic control sent a follow-me vehicle. This is a type of vehicle. It's called an aircraft assist vehicle in the layman's term. Would go out and lead the aircrafts to a parking area. This aircraft assist vehicle went out there, found the two pilots. They were outside their aircraft, stunned, didn't know what really happened. In the meantime, this UFO had taken off and was flying away. The pilots were taken to base operations, interviewed, checked by a medical officer. They had a strange story about experiencing something that they really couldn't explain, that they saw these tall-looking humanoids. They were very, very tall, maybe 7 to 8 feet tall. They were very thin, and they had helmets, bronze helmets on. And they had very long arms. And although these extraterrestrials were talking to them in a language, they could hear the language, but they couldn't understand it. They were understanding what they were saying in their head, such as telepathy. And then they found themselves on the ground.
What was the message that they were?
The message was, Earth has to stop exploding atomic bombs. You are damaging the universe. And if you don't stop, you're going to find Earth burning. And both pilots later told me that they saw pictures of Earth burning. Now, these two pilots eventually were able to fly their aircrafts without incident back to Kirtland. I had been notified. I met him at the Air National Guard Operations Center. I put him in my vehicle and I drove him back to the OSI office. I took him in an interview room. I placed him in separate interview rooms. I went in and initially interviewed both of them, got their information. They told me basically what happened. While I was in, my supervisor came in, knocked on the door, and told me to come out. He said, there's 2 Air Force intelligence officers here from Det 22. Det 22 was an Air Force intelligence operations location on the base, a detachment. I knew some of them, but I didn't know all of them. I didn't know these 2. I went out and I said, yeah, can I help you? And he said, we'd like to take over this investigation. And I said, well, who are you guys? And they showed me Air Force intelligence ID cards. I said, well, this is an OSI matter. He said, no, it's our matter now. Now, these 2 men were dressed in black suits. They didn't have military uniforms on. So I checked with my supervisor, and I said, these guys are trying to interfere with our investigation. He said, well, I just got a teletype in, and it's telling you to turn it over to them. So I did. I did what my supervisor told me. They went in. About an hour later, the 2 intelligence officers came out and left. I went in and talked to the 2 officers. Well, the 2 intelligence officers came out to me and told me they were wrong. What they saw wasn't what they're claiming to see. We're going to do a report, and they're going to keep their mouths shut. And that's what they told me, and they left. Well, I went back in and talked to them, and they were scared. He said, we don't like you 2 cohorts there. And I said, well, number one, they don't work for OSI. I don't know who they are. I mean, I know they're intelligence officers. Right. He said, well, they're not even dressed right. I mean, they're dressed in suits. You know, they got long hair. I said, well, you know what? They're U.S. intelligence officers. They're not OSI agents. I said, what did they tell you? They told us if we reported what we saw, they were going to bust us. They're going to send us to Leavenworth. I said, what? I said, okay, now I'm interested. I want to know what you saw. And so they gave me the whole story. I get written statements from them, plus I recorded it. So they left. I took them back to their car, and they left and went home. About 2 weeks later, they came to my office, both of them. And they said, our off-base residences, and they lived together in the same apartment complex.
Sure.
But in different apartments. Our apartments were broken into. I said, broken into when? A couple of days ago or a day before. I said, what was taken? He said, as far as I know, just 35 millimeter canisters. I said, well, did you report it to Albuquerque Police Department? Yeah, but when a patrolman got there, he told us we had to report it to the military. They weren't going to take a report. I said, what? That's off base. So I said, okay, I'll follow you over there. So I went over there with another agent to their residence. And I looked through, and they showed me the door. It was a sloppy break-in.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And the door was jimmied and so forth and so on. And he said, well, one of them said, I have a camera, an Canon AE1 camera up here on the shelf, and I have film canisters. I take pictures of sceneries and so forth. And the other one said he had another camera with film cartridges, and all of them are missing. I said, that's strange. So I started checking around the residence, and the first thing I went to was their phones. And I opened their phones up, and they were bugged. I didn't tell them they were bugged because I figured it was a FISA, a Federal Intelligence Surveillance warrant, and that somebody's investigating them. So I didn't tell them anything. I went back to the office, and I checked with the FBI. They were just down the hall from us. I went down, and my contact with the FBI, I said, hey, you guys have a FISA warrant on such and such addresses? He checked. No, we don't know anything about it. It's okay. So I went back to the office. I sent a message up to Air Force headquarters. The next day, one of them called and said, no, we don't have any. There's nothing, no FISA warrants on that. I thought, wow, that's strange. So the last place I checked was the domestic collections, intelligence collections, which was the CIA, and bingo. Yeah. They had. But it was a non-law enforcement warrant. It was for 60 days. A non-law enforcement warrant is, it can't be, anything they gather can't be used against anybody. It's just for intelligence purposes. A law enforcement warrant, within 30 days, you have to notify the target, and the information can be used against you in a court of law. Well, this isn't going to be used against them. So I went back to the office. Maybe a week or two later, these 2 intelligence officers showed up in my office and said, you're interfering with our investigation.
Oh,
said,
you're getting
why
in trouble,
am I interfering?
Right?
He said, you went out and started checking on our warrants. And I said, so? I said, you think I did something wrong? I'll take you down to my supervisors. He's a GM-14. You talk to him. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to go down to the FBI office just down the hallway here. You can report it to them. Oh, of course, they backed off and said, oh, we don't want you to get in trouble. I said, I'm not worried about getting in trouble. I'm worried about you guys getting in trouble for what you did. You're going to either clue me in on what you're doing, brief me into this program, or I'm going to go down there to the FBI office. So then they said, you got a Q room? I said, yeah, a Q room is a security room that you can talk about top secret or above in it. So I took them downstairs to our Q room, went in, and they briefed me into the program. And they knew that this extraterrestrial craft was hostile. They knew it. And this extraterrestrial race, humanoids, that had threatened these two Air Force pilots were hostile. And they're investigating it. And they showed me authority, and I understood what they were doing. But they operated within Section K, and they operated outside the norm. They should have briefed me in a long time ago,
right,
but they didn't. And so that's my dealings with Men in Black.
Do you know what kind of extraterrestrials they were, and why they were hostile?
At that time in 1982, I wasn't fully briefed into the different races of extraterrestrials who were visiting Earth. One of the intelligence officers had a sketch. It wasn't a picture, but it was a sketch of this ET. And it was very long and slender, very long legs, very long arms, and they wore this helmet. It appeared to be a helmet with almost insect-like eyes sticking out of the helmet. Now, I'm not sure if that was their head or if that was just the helmet. But later on, when I was fully briefed in, you connect that to the praying mantis-type extraterrestrials that created humanoids or robots.
And in what way were they showing hostilities to these pilots?
They were threatening them. They're threatening them personally. And there was a lot of threats issued to them. They were going to be cremated. They were going to be, their lifespan would end. Or I think what one of the pilots told me, it was explained to them their life cycle would end, whatever it was meant. They understood, I think the extraterrestrials understood us having life cycles. And these hostile ETs were running rampant around Earth. There wasn't any control on them. And that's why they considered them hostile.
Was there a prior history of this race threatening?
Yes, this one intelligence officer told me there is a prior history of this particular ET race of harming humans, damaging property, military aircrafts. There's a historical record of them, and that's why they considered them hostile.
Now the big question is, have you ever been in the role of a Men in Black?
On one occasion, I was somewhat loaned to Section K to obtain an object from an Air Force person. And I operated within their guidelines, not AF-OSI guidelines, to obtain that object. And it was a successful operation. But the only time I ever did it was then.
Do you think they chose you for that position because you are Air Force intelligence?
Well, one of the reasons they chose me, because I had a linguist ability. I went to language school. I speak German. They wanted me to approach this person as a foreign national, and German was a foreign national. The other agent that was loaned, he was a Spanish-speaking linguist, and so the both of us was approaching this. It's a somewhat complicated case, but as non-Americans.
I see. What specifics can you share with us on that mission?
Well, the initial approach to this Air Force person, he was an officer, high-ranking officer. We failed because he wouldn't cooperate with us. He would speak with us. He would relate some stories to us, but he wouldn't ever address the direct mission that we were there to discuss or want. So we had to go to step 2, which was using some clandestine operations, which I'm not going to go into right now. We were able to incapacitate the Air Force person without harming him in any way, obtaining the object that the Air Force wanted, and then complete the mission that way. It took several weeks in order to get what they wanted, and we were able to get the object, which ended up to be extraterrestrial in nature.
Amazing. What does a modern, MIB program look like currently today?
Well, I'm certainly out of the program, but I know of other intelligence officers. I maintain contact with some, and it's still going on today. But I think they have different missions. As our technology has advanced and our way of life has advanced, they had to advance their tricks and their policies.